It is a huge honor today at 12 noon in Phoenix, Arizona, to be podcast interviewing Hajtó, Dr. Hajtó, an aesthetic cosmetic dentist legend in Munich, Germany. And it's now 9 p.m. there. Thank you for, are you staying up past your bedtime to do this? Or what is, what is your natural bedtime in your life?
Midnight or a little bit later.
Midnight or a little bit later. Okay, so I'm not going to keep you over your bedtime, but Germany is just known for, Mercedes and Porsche, and I've been there several times. My favorite dental meeting in the world is always in Cologne, Germany. That's the IDS meeting, is it? IDS?
IDS, right.
And what does that stand for? International Dental Show?
Show.
Yeah. It's absolutely the largest meeting in the world. I think
right.
110, 120,000 dentists show up. You could not see every booth if you were just walking at a brisk pace. You couldn't even walk by every booth. But you have to admit, Germany, it's got some of the greatest dental companies that ever existed, from Cavo to Sirona to Ivoclar. I count Ivoclar. It's Liechtenstein, but wasn't Liechtenstein used to be part of Germany?
No.
Liechtenstein was never part of Germany?
Liechtenstein, actually, it's a small country of its own, and it always was. It still is. It has its own, how do you say? It's not a king, but...
yeah, but you really can't tell, but it's very much like Germany. You can't really tell you've left Germany and gone to Liechtenstein. Would you say that's true, or is it very different to you?
Not from our perspective. I think for Americans, maybe all Europe looks quite similar. Everything is so close, but to us, Switzerland and Austria is definitively different from Germany.
Well,
they talk different. You hear them when they talk completely different from us.
Well, let's start with your book. You just came out with a book called Anteriors, Natural Beautiful Teeth. What made you write that book? Actually,
I was always interested in art already in school. So that was one of my fields. I also did my high school exam. So when I then did dentistry, I somehow missed the creative part and all of this of creation, because what I learned in dental school was rather repairing teeth and not creating. And we haven't been taught this in dental school at all. That was something, and I think it's still not really an important part of our education here in Europe or in Germany. Still, there is no curriculum, or all the teaching materials are not really structured. And at that time, actually, I wrote the book about 15 years ago. It was just now translated to English. So 15 years ago, there were not many books on this if you wanted to teach yourself and read about it. So there was the book by Goldstein-Gaber and Schisch. Those were the two, and Rufenacht. These were the three books. And actually, I didn't want to write a book. I was interested to teach myself. So I started looking up all the literature, what already exists. And I was really amazed to find how much there already was existing. And most of it came from the US. There were studies on different aspects of perception, how teeth look better, what makes teeth look natural or more harmonic or more beautiful. And actually I did two books. It was first came the project, and I cannot tell you where that came from. Maybe that's how I think or how I'm structured. Somehow I realized that it will take a very long time if I want to learn about natural teeth, if I do this over the years. Then I will see a few nice cases, maybe this month, maybe in 3 months, I collect them. So somehow I got the idea to do this faster, and still I do things like that. If I'm really interested in something, I try to get an overview on it. And it's a lot of work to sit down and do hundreds or thousands of samples on something, but human perception is very good at recognizing patterns. We are not good at remembering what happened half a year ago and what it looked like. But when you put something in front of you, like 40 or 100 natural dentitions as models or tooth shapes, then immediately you can recognize similarities, differences, and characteristics. So I placed an ad here in the local newspaper and asked for tooth models. And it was really funny who everybody came there, because there were people with crowns. So I wrote natural, healthy teeth. And there were people who, and I offered some money, because I knew I want to have the rights on this material. I want to be able to use the pictures, to do some models. I took impressions on those. So I think it was several hundred people who came to me, and I looked at them and I selected those who were really healthy and beautiful and natural, perfect dentitions. And then I took 1 hour for each patient and took a full set of photographs and impressions, and had them sign that I might use all this for digital and for printed media. And that was a picture atlas that I had then. And that was done in half a year, so that I had quite fast. And as that book, it's the black book, doesn't contain much text. It's just a catalog of beautiful teeth. That got very successful among dental technicians, because for them it's like a catalog of natural teeth. They can communicate with the patient on how big the variety of teeth are. If a patient comes and says, I want beautiful teeth, yeah, how should I know what's in his mind? So if you show him this whole selection, then there's something you can start discussing on. But when I had the book finished, that was, I think, almost 15 years ago, I realized nobody knows me. Nobody knows that I'm actually a dentist who also likes to do this, and I have nice cases. And also I wanted to learn about, I realized there's certain things myself on these models, but I wanted to know what has already been described on this. So I started researching all the literature and started writing the book actually for me, and it somehow got out of hand. So I think I wrote that 5 or 7 years. So my daughter, when she came, my wife came and said, when our daughter gets born, you stop with that book, because then we have 2 kids. And I said, yeah, I will stop. And the moment my daughter was born, I realized, I didn't write anything on optical properties and tooth color. So I have to do that as well. So that was another 2 years. And in the end, it got quite a big book. And by that, I learned everything I know about dental aesthetics. And the interesting thing is, I think it's not a limited field, but it's not endless. You can learn anything about aesthetics and what natural teeth are like if you put effort into that. It's completely different with function. There you never stop learning. But aesthetics is something, if you really want to learn about it, you can do that and be sure that at a certain point you know almost everything there is. So that was the story of the book.
I think you'd sell a lot of books, turning that book into an online CE course on Dental Town, where you showed pages and cases of those books. I think it would be a great online CE course and sell some books.
Actually, I already sent you a webinar on some general principles, which contains contents of the book. But I don't think the idea you just said would really work well, because the book actually contains old cases. I wrote that like 10 years ago it was finished. So it came out in Germany 2005. And everybody who wants to know about the book can just buy the book and read the book. Since then, a lot of things developed.
Where can they buy the book? What website would they go on? What website would they go to?
There is a website, the online store of my publisher here. The publisher is Teamwork Media, and Teamwork Media, they have a distributor in the US, but I think they didn't really push that a lot in the past. Now that the English book is out, actually there's only that website in Germany, but they ship everywhere. So
what's the website?
It's easiest if people are interested in the things I do, they look up my name, hajtó.de. There I put all the links to my projects. There are the books, the models.
And so that's www.hajto.de.
Exactly.
And DE stands for Deutschland.
Exactly.
I want to ask you about that. Are Americans the only one that call your Deutschland Germany? I mean, when people come there from Sweden and Norway, do they say, "Oh, I'm going to Germany," or do they say, "I'm going to Deutschland"?
I don't know how in the Swedish language they say. They have a word for Germany, obviously, and the French they said Allemagne. So each language has its word, but as in Europe, actually English is the common language. People from England or Italy, if they don't talk in their own language, they say Germany. Deutschland, only the Germans.
Really? Only Germans call it Deutschland?
Yeah, I think so.
Huh,
Yeah.
okay. So what do you think, Jan? And by the way, his name it's pronounced Jan, but in America it looks like it would be Jan. It's Jan.
You can say Jan. Jan is fine.
Oh no, we should try to say it the way
Jan, I think,
your mom and dad.
Female name in America, right?
Well, actually, my dental assistant Jan, she's been with me since day one, 28 years, and I'm going to start calling her Jan. And but so what do you first of all, explain what do you mean by when you say the biological foundation for the social role of teeth or the genetic code of natural teeth? And I think a weird word for me is Americans seem to buy anything that's natural. They'll say, there'll be two brands. They'll say, well, this one's natural. And I'll say, well, what is natural? I mean, a tornado, a hurricane, a black hole sucking in a galaxy. So how do you define beauty? And I also have the perception that a lot of Europeans think Americans their teeth are too white, like when they bleach. I know when I go to England, a lot of dentists have told me that a lot of cosmetic cases in America they look like clowns. They bleach their teeth too white. They have veneers too big. So how do you really define beauty? You're into art. Isn't beauty in the eye of the beholder? And what is the biological foundation for the social role of teeth or the genetic code of beautiful teeth that you talk about?
Actually, that's a lot of questions you ask now. And in the webinar, I just uploaded that yesterday. So I think I think you technically already might have looked at it. There, I explain about that in detail. So everybody who's interested in that should watch that webinar because it's 2 times 70 minutes. And actually, it takes that long to explain all this in depth. But just maybe some short ideas or answers on this. Beauty, and these things are also described more in detail in my book because, of course, I couldn't come up with this all myself. I read a lot of literature, psychological, also literature on optical perception, on beautification of the body, of aesthetic surgery and those things. Beauty is one of the most paradoxical things in the world. It's similar to life because life implies death. There is no life without death. So beauty is always contains some contradictions. You need some perfect idea to have something beautiful. But on the other hand, in Germany, there's a saying, small mistakes make beautiful. So if something is too perfect, too symmetrical, that doesn't look beautiful anymore. The beauty is a kind of living order. It's not a mathematical order, like you put some numbers in a row or building blocks or really those ugly buildings. So if we perceive something as beautiful, it must contain more. It must contain levels or behind what is visible, obviously. And that can be a lot of things that you see in nature, that are coastlines or the snowflakes and growing nature. We perceive as humans that there is some rule behind it, or maybe even some divine purpose, but we cannot see it immediately, that it's in a very simple order. Therefore, beauty is philosophers think for thousands of years, what is beauty? So I cannot tell you what is beauty, but especially in the case of teeth, we have to talk about attractivity. And that is what I mean by the biological foundation, because we are biological beings. We are primates. We live, and what we perceive on each other as beautiful, that has to do with attraction, sexual attraction, and how we believe that the other human will behave to us, or how his genetic if he brings good genes, it's worth reproducing. And for that, teeth play an important role. And I found a very interesting book, a small booklet from a Canadian biologist, and took those things also in my book because I thought they are really true, and they helped me understand my patients better. That is, that we are not just living and reproducing, we live in hierarchical structures. We have always some individuals who try to be the boss and rule and set the rules, and others who are more subordinate and follow. And it's not important to them to dominate. And that is true for many animals and creatures. And in animals that live in such hierarchical structures, of course, there are also fights, and we show off against each other. So weapons are, of course, important, and the most dangerous weapon of a primate are his teeth. You don't want to be bitten by a monkey. So our teeth are our weapons. Now, we don't use them anymore as weapons, except some years ago, American boxer, I think, he used his teeth. So it might happen, but you know those sabers which are parading on the military? They still have the sword or the saber, which they don't use anymore in modern combat. But they keep it in high respect, because a weapon which we don't use anymore doesn't mean that we don't value it a lot. So weapons and weapon-bearing structures, those play an important role when we define each other in a hierarchy. And those who want to dominate more, this helped me to understand my patients, especially for women, when you know all those, you know the gray mouse who doesn't put on makeup, she has her clothes are not so flashy. For those people, it's better not to do perfect white teeth. They are more happy with some characteristics, some little bit change of the arrangement of the teeth, some crowding is fine for them. But on the other end of the scale, you have those ladies who put their hair and spend hours in front of the mirror and put their eyeliner to the 10th of a millimeter. You better do perfect teeth on those, because they won't accept minimum deviations or even small stains, and they have the eye of the eagle and will tell you things you won't see yourself with your look. So that's what I mean by biological foundation, that teeth are part of our attractivity, and we have to understand that if we want to give the patient what the patient actually expects or is later happy with. We cannot put the same teeth on everybody.
So yeah. I want to ask you some specific questions. This woman, she's spent hours in front of the mirror. She's got all this, her hair's all done up. There's probably chemicals in it that stiffen it, mousse, whatever, hairspray. She puts makeup, lipstick, all this stuff. So when she wants these perfect white teeth, do we really have to file down the tooth to make room for the thickness of the veneer? Or can we just put laminate facing on the tooth? I mean, that will thicken the tooth, but look at the fact that she has fake boobs, she has lipstick on, she has chemicals in her hair. Is adding 1.5 millimeter of porcelain on the front of the tooth that big of a deal, or do we really need to reduce tooth structure? So can you answer that?
That's a very good question. It's the first time I heard that. So it's a very interesting question, and it shows me one thing. Dentistry, it comes down to the question, what is dentistry? Dentistry is medicine. It's a craft, of course. Dentistry is also a business. But I think mainly dentistry is philosophical science, because these things we can answer by thinking and trying to figure out theoretically. And that's a question like that, which I think really deserves a lot of consideration, because it really impacts the way we treat our patients and what we will do on them. And I think I never heard this question, and it has some points to it. I think it's really legitimate to ask if in the case we know that we go beyond the natural, because I call these patients that are so perfect, they don't want natural, they want supernatural or beyond natural. And I show also in my webinar a few pictures how that looks, because these are synthetic teeth. You won't find a single natural arch in a living person who is that perfect. So we have to perfect it. We have to really make it brighter, bigger, whatever. More like the media smile, which is more close. So actually, you're right. I think it might be legitimate to deviate, to go away from the natural dentition and add on these teeth for the sake of not having to remove healthy tooth substance and minimize the biological cost. But I think there are some things just to be considered, and I cannot answer you this question absolutely. I think there might some other colleagues here who listen to this and start thinking about it, and there come some other points to their mind where they think, yeah, maybe this and this might all be. But a few things that come to my mind on this question are that if I know that my procedure is so long-lasting, which actually we today reached with modern ceramics, with lithium silicates and lithium disilicates, and our good bonding procedures. We know in literature that veneers count among the long-lasting procedures we have, and statistically they have the least failure rate. There are even studies with 0% failure rate after 10 years. So we don't have actually that with many other dental procedures. So when I know that I have such a good method, then why is it so bad to remove a little bit of tooth substance as I assume that it might last a lifetime. Or actually, when I do veneers, I try to reach that. That's my goal. I don't tell the patient, okay, I do this for 5 years or 10 years, and then we schedule the next appointment for redoing them. No, I hope they last for a lifetime. So I think there is not such a big problem then also to remove some tooth substance, if I gain other things for that. And I don't do many non-prep veneers because it's not just that it looks bigger, but you close the proximal areas. Hygiene gets more difficult. You get margins that are not smooth anymore. Veneer, you know best what veneer means literally. It's the piece of wood that it's put in the other piece of wood. So in the end, it's really smooth and flat. So I prefer margins on laminate veneers that are really smooth and don't add on the tooth substance. So even if I don't prep, I try to make a very slight margin so that I get a nice finishing line, which I can then polish, and it's really smooth, because that will last longer than other line, an additional ceramic on top of that. And there's one point I don't want to talk too much, just mention it shortly, because I show a case actually in that webinar I sent to you, where I had one or two failures where the patient didn't tolerate this additional material, especially when it collides with the lower lip. If the lower lip cannot glide smoothly above it. And it's similar like with the lips that are blown up by some material. People get functional or phonetic or comfort problems with that. So that's not worth saving substance on one hand and then the patient gets some other problems. So actually, we always, when we plan veneer cases, we always do a slightly additional wax up. Everything that I can add on the existing arch, I don't have to remove from the tooth substance. But I wouldn't say in general that it's a method to do it like that, because each arch is different. You have arches which are very small, you can do non-prep perfectly, but others, they are so flared out, so you have to remove a millimeter to be in the arch where you want to have your later result, and then still remove something to get there. So actually, I have a nice lecture on this issue of veneer prep depth from non-prep to full invasive, and that would make a nice webinar. So if you like my webinars, I'm really glad to put on topics like this one by one in single segments.
I want to ask you.
I answered your question, or I didn't get off the point somewhere.
So CIRAC was actually the process of CIRAC was actually started in France, but it really came to market from Germany, Sirona. So my question to you is, when I got out of school, the only way to really make a veneer was stacking feldspathic porcelain, and now you're in the home of Sirona in Germany, CAD/CAM. Can you make aesthetic veneers with CAD/CAM, or do you like the older traditional feldspathic? Or are there cases for both?
From the aesthetic, if I want to reach perfect aesthetics, you cannot beat the stacked porcelain, because there you can filter color differences already on very deep layers. You can put in all the individual effects in the tooth. And a tooth structure is actually a very dynamic optical thing. It changes its properties depending on the direction of light. And with all monolithic structures, you cannot reach that. It's really difficult to reach. But as we talked before, not every patient wants these characteristics. So if you have a patient who wants completely monochromatic teeth, which you have to talk about before with a patient. For example, I made for me a picture with 6 different incisal characterizations, so I can talk with the patient and ask him what he prefers. So we don't do an incisal edge which is too translucent and then the patient is disappointed, because we can do anything we like, from completely opaque to very translucent. So it depends on the patient. And from the aesthetic point, the nicest cases you see are always stacked and layered ceramics. From stability, from the point of stability, I prefer lithium disilicate. So actually, I try to solve every case with lithium disilicate plus some cutback and incisal characterization, because that material is simply 3 to 4 times more durable than the weak ceramics, and that is an advantage I don't want to give up. And a CEREC, I did a few cases, but actually it's also possible to reach nice results, but we have to put so much effort into it. In surface texturing, actually Germany is a high wages country, so my hourly rate is much higher than a dental technician. If I can delegate something to the lab, and he sits there for hours and does the fine structures and everything, I would delegate that. And in the lab, he can also press it. He doesn't have to CAD-CAM mill it. So chairside, it's not really, for me, a good business option to do it chairside, because you see perfect cases from like Paulo Cano, who uses the skin concept, but it takes hours. And for that, we have this division of labor here, that if it's something time-consuming and the technician can do it, in my office, I rather delegate that to the lab. So can reach perfect results with all these methods, of course.
But so you're not really using for your average veneer case, your just standard average veneer case. You're not really using CAD-CAM or feldspathic. You're mostly using lithium disilicate.
Yes, and
what brand name is that? Did you have any brand?
Lithium disilicate, that's, I think we can usually avoid mentioning companies and brand names, but the patents are still in place. So the IPS Emax Press and the IPS Emax CAT from Ivoclar, those are lithium disilicates, and now there are some patents expired. So the company Vita, together with Dentsply and Fraunhofer Institute are research institutes in Germany, they developed a copy of that. It's a zirconia reinforced lithium silicate, very similar, but we have longest experience with the Emax, because they have so many different translucencies and colors, and also ingots that have a multi-layer. So we have years of experience with that. But it was a learning curve. If somebody starts work with that, go to those dental technicians who are really experienced, can tell you all the tricks, because it's a tricky material. It has some properties which are not so to our advantage. It can be a little bit greenish or translucent. You have to know how to handle it. If somebody really seriously thinks to work with that, then there are super experts like Oliver Brix or Ubasi, who also co-developed this material, and it's really worth to send your dental technician there to shorten your learning curve, because the really good results, you have to have some experience with that.
And I was wondering also if Germany is very different than the United States in the fact that if you did 100 veneer cases, what percent of those cases would be on females versus males?
I would say about 70 to 30%.
70 to 30%. And do you think that's changing? I mean, like in my dad's generation, no man would get veneers. But then in my generation, maybe it's like, I would think maybe I'm 52, I would think maybe 10% might. But I see the next generation in the United States, like you say, like 30, 70. And I'm wondering, do you think in 25, 30 years, cosmetics will be 50-50 men, women? Or I mean, do you see it trending towards importance to both sexes, or do you think it will, due to
Yeah,
our biological nature, it will always be?
The trend is there. It goes in that direction, but slowly. I don't know how long it will take when it's 50-50 or if it will be 50-50 at all, because this is a question that goes in the field. Will maybe in 30 years males use more makeup or put on some lip gloss? In general, I think we males are not so vain. To us, it's not so important. I wouldn't put up your makeup for this video conference, and I don't care if I have a head like you, if I lose my hair. But everybody's different. But there are patients who come, and sometimes that's funny when they come and. Especially older males, and say, I'm not really happy with my teeth, and what can we do about it? Sometimes they are not so really confident. They say, I'm not sure, my friends say you are crazy, why are you doing this, your teeth are healthy. So I think the social surroundings where we live, our buddies, beer drinking buddies, whoever, that also influence this. So if you maybe for yourself feel the need, I'm not so happy with that, but all your friends tell you, yeah, you're crazy. Now you want to make some veneers for yourself. That influences. I noticed that with some patients who told me that actually their friends and their social circles, they won't understand that he comes here. So they almost sneak in the office.
Do you think the need for women to put on makeup and get cosmetic procedures, do you think that's a social pressure, or do you think it's a biological pressure? I mean,
I think that's out of my expertise.
Well, you've done a lot of studying, though. You've done a lot of reading on this. I think you might have read and studied more literature going back than anybody I know of.
There are different reasons why people do cosmetic procedures on themselves, and one of the most important reasons is the urge to belong to a certain category or a certain group. That can be the need to belong to the normals. If you are deformed, if you have a burn, you don't want to be different. So you want to look like normal. And it depends on what is normal around you. Actually, my office partner, had an office in California. He practiced many years. He's originally from Europe, but he had a practice in Tulare, and he taught also at the UCLA. So he tells me a lot how Americans are. And he showed me some cases he did on people there in California. And as I understand, it's especially a Californian thing. Maybe on the East Coast it's different again. But in California, where the sun shines, where everything is so bright, and people are beautiful and work out, and more people around you have all these super bright bleached teeth, then you don't belong to them if you don't do something about it. So your question was biology or social. I think, of course, there is a biological foundation for that. Girls play with dolls and they dress and they love shoes and dressings and that. And not so many men like to go in a shoe store and spend hours to choose their shoes. So there is a difference. But I think it's also social because the surroundings you have, the country you live in, if you have different problems. I think it's also a thing that has to do with our wealthy society. Because if you have other problems, how you survive every day and get your food and don't get shot on some war zones, then you don't care about your teeth. If you have everything else in the world, then what's left? Yeah, have nice teeth. So that also plays a role, maybe.
So what pearls could you give dentists who want to do better aesthetic dentistry? I'm going to give you. Do you have any tips on your standard veneer case on a woman? Things that you think these 7,000 dentists listening to this might not think about enough, or tips you could give them?
I'm trying to think about some tips. Sure, I have several tips. What I try to practice is a coherent philosophy or coherent systematic dentistry where everything fits together. Because it starts actually with how you diagnose the patient, how much time you spend on understanding what the patient really wants, and the way you approach the planning and your analysis. So I try to go very structured, to do an aesthetic analysis. I don't do long smile designs because it can go fast in the head if you have the expertise on that. The best tip I can give colleagues who want to be better aesthetic dentists is you should really love what you do and spend a lot of time try to learn everything about it, be it in courses or you teach it yourself. But first of all, get yourself a digital camera and start photographing, because digital photograph is the third eye. You cannot, in the webinar I sent to you, I show you a few examples how with the eye you cannot really measure. The eye deceives us very much. But photographs, they are objective, you can measure on and you can document and also see what you did years ago and improve on that. Another tip, I can give more like these general tips because I think that's what's the underlying driver that you get better. Never be content with the level you are at, because you can always be better, and there are always guys who are much better than you. One doesn't have to go into extremes to remove every decay under the microscope, but there's always a level of perfection. And if you, interestingly, when you look on Facebook, there are excellent cases which are not published in high-gloss magazines, but people just publish their before and after, and you really see that you don't see anything. It's like teeth that are so perfect as the most healthy teeth. So try always to improve and ask if what you do is really right. That is maybe one thing. And otherwise, I think a structured approach. Also that you as dentists get some competence on what you maybe believe is a competence field of the dental technician, because you cannot leave everything to the dental technician. If the patient is not happy, he will come back to you and ask you about it. So we have to be able to shape teeth, to improve on them. And we do that every day on our composites. So you have the chance to practice on direct composite fillings, surface texture, layering things, and the proportions. So then you can better communicate with your dental technician. Then get yourself a dental technician that really you form a team with, where you have a good communication, who understands what you can deliver and you understand what the dental technician can deliver, because it's a team effort. The veneers, the ceramic itself will be done by a dental technician. And that is, maybe it's interesting for you Americans, because that is really different here in Germany. Here in Germany, dental technicians have a much more important role. Sometimes they sit with the patient, they do try-ins, they work on the patient, because here in Germany, we have to give the patient the invoice of the dental technician as it is. I cannot buy prosthetic work like I buy materials, and I try to buy them cheap and sell them expensive and make my profit like that. No way. It's a law here that the dental technician writes an invoice, and that invoice I give to my patient. So by that, automatically, the dental technician has a different role, because I think the system is like that, yet that you can optimize yourself on buying the prosthetics. I've heard stories that some people try to buy really cheap work from cheap labor countries, and because they have such a reputation, they sell it expensive. That wouldn't work here at all. So that's also one reason. I think there's a lot more, but I don't know if you think more of practical tips. I think that's a thing I can show in a webinar, how we work with wax up, mock up, diagnose, and then step by step achieve our result. Because this step by step dentistry, I don't just prep teeth, give it to some dental technician, ask him to do nice teeth. We work with prototypes, we work with imagings. There are a lot of methods how you can pre-visualize your result, and one should know about these methods. But it's a huge field, and I think it's rather something I could explain with slides and examples.
It's interesting in the United States, when you go to the hospital or you go to the doctor, you do get a direct bill from all the different people from the labs and all that kind of stuff like that. In dentistry in the United States, it's different than it is in with U.S. hospitals. But in Germany, the lab man sends the bill directly to the patient. I think that's a better system. Do you? Or do you like the United States dental system where you buy a crown from me and I pay the lab man?
It has both advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantage of our system is that some dentists do not take care to become competent in certain fields, and there is a void which dental technicians then see, okay, if the dentist doesn't take care of that, I'm also not stupid, I will do that. For example, implant guides or setting up full dentures. I think there are in Germany more dental technicians who are good at setting up full dentures with really also knowing about function and stuff than dentists. So it erodes a little bit our competence as dentists. On the other hand, if it's on a fair level and both are on the eye level, and I respect what the dental technician is good at certain things and he respects my limits, it really works well. Of course, if you are clever, dentistry is also business. So if you're a good businessman and are able to find a good dental technician who works for cheap prices, I think I would have a more happy life than give all that big amount of money to the dental technician. In Germany, there are prosthetic cases where half of the amount the patient pays goes to the dental technician, or even more. And as far as I know, in the US, it's always only 25% or a third at the maximum. So because of that, our business side is a little bit more difficult, and because we cannot really make some profit on that. So I don't know your system. I never lived it, but I think both has its upsides and downsides.
I want to ask you another question. If somebody does an Emax crown on a molar and it chips, do you think that was from the Emax, or do you think that was from the occlusion? And is that even a fair question?
You ask questions where I could start talking 2 hours about, because what you ask about implies information about material, and I could tell you a lot about the different ceramics and the properties and the materials, about function, which is a huge field, and then also about prep design, because, okay, I try to give a few answers. Emax actually doesn't chip. As far as I know, the word chipping is a cohesive fracture. That means ceramic fractures within its material. You have that a lot in veneered zirconia. So the ceramic on top of the zirconia, that can chip within itself. In Emax, if I see failures, those are mainly semilunar or complete fractures. So that the Emax, because usually it's a monolithic structure. If you put on layered ceramics on Emax, it behaves very similar like a metal ceramic crown. So you have also chippings on metal ceramics, but really not so often like on zirconia. So on Emax, if you ask about the chipping, it might have been some feldspathic porcelain on top, some weak ceramic. Then it might be that the ceramic is too weak. Emax is actually in itself strong enough with the initial 500 megapascal, 400 to 500 initial load, and also it's here we have a very good dentist who even recommends it specifically for bruxers, because it's still not so hard as zirconia, so it can adapt, and it's still a very strong material, and he's very successful with that. So I know that, or I use Emax really as a reliable material. So if Emax breaks, I think it can be several other reasons, beginning from the way of cementation or bonding, or the prep. Very often minimum thicknesses are not respected, especially on molars, because on the molar you have a very, very often not enough space. I'm involved in a larger digital lab here in Germany, and we do Emax crowns for years now for many, many dentists, regular dentists, no specialists. In a big percentage of the cases, we have to call them and say, occlusal reduction was not enough space occlusally. That's, I think, one of the most common reasons for that. And many other reasons, like, for example, it's very important that when you adjust ceramics, and in the mouth it's normal, you have often to adjust a little bit on the occlusion. You have to polish every ceramic, not only Emax, as good as you can. Really put some time and effort to give it a good surface, because those micro cracks you leave with a rough burr, those will later go inside the material and cause cracks. So it goes through the whole clinical procedures, these possible reasons of chipping, and also mistakes in the lab, of course, firing temperatures, whatever. So I think there is not the single reason.
So let's go more specifics. How much material thickness do you need? How much thickness does the material need? 1.5 millimeters, 2 millimeters? And what type of shoulder do you want? Some dentists are doing a bevel, some do a shoulder with a bevel, some just do a full shoulder. Isn't a shoulder with a bevel at the end of the day just a bevel? So what type of shoulder and thickness do you like on a molar?
On a molar, occlusally, I prefer 1.5 millimeters for crown. You have to see the difference between a crown and an onlay or partial crown. So if it's really a full crown with a margin around intraclavicular and really subgingival or the gingiva, and it's a full coverage crown, then the occlusal thickness is more important than for an onlay, because you have these side walls and you have the inside of the stump. It's always can give you some forces, some tensile forces. So there I go for the 1.5 millimeters, which really cannot be reached every time. Ivoclar even lowered the minimum thickness officially on the occlusal for onlays on 1 millimeter, but not for crowns. So for crowns it's still 1.5, and for onlays or partial crowns it's 1 millimeter. And there's an interesting study done in Kiel where they did even thinner ones in 3 groups, and the absolute minimum I use on onlays is 0.7. Below 0.7 you get problems, but in certain, if in certain areas you have a pit and it's thinner than 1, that's okay. But on crowns 1.5, and the finish line I prefer a pronounced bevel. So not a 90-degree shoulder, but really a deep deeper bevel for that, because especially the press material, you can get very nice sharp margins on that, and it's I think what's more important than the design on the finish line is also the angle, your prep angle, because that very often is not steep enough. And it also depends on the way of cementation, because Ivoclar, officially, they allow you to cement Emacs. And in my opinion, that is a concession to the dentists who maybe don't want to bond each crown, because it's really technique sensitive to bond on a last molar with subgingival margins a crown really well. So I always do adhesive cementation on the Emacs crowns. I always use a dual cure adhesive cement. I don't use Glazonumer or other cements on Emacs, because every ceramic profits from the strengthening on the inside by the cement.
What is your brand? Will you go through your cementation process with your dual cure cementation process? What brand and how do you do it?
I love for the adhesive cementation, dual cure for these posterior things. On the anterior, for veneers, I use light cure material. That's the Variolink aesthetic. Before it was Variolink veneer, and now it's Variolink aesthetic. I think that the brand name is not so important. One should use what works in your hands and you have best results with. I'm sure there are also others. For the posterior dual cure, in my hands, what works very well is from 3MS to the Relight Ultimate with Scotch Bond Universal. That is very few post-operative sensitivities, highest bonding values you find, even better than the old Syntac and OptiBond classical systems. It has also its drawbacks. There's nothing perfect in dentistry. Everything you use also has its disadvantages. You just have to know that and handle it. And I live with that because I like the other advantages. The material has a very short gel point, so when you put on the light, it cures very fast, which on the other side is good because it shows that it needs low energy from the light, and it cures also when you go through the crown. So you cannot really pre-cure it well, because very soon it flips and is really hard. And the other thing is the material is rock solid. It's a composite, so when you have excess, you really have sharp, thin scalers and sharp scalpel knife to remove it. But rather do that then and have a good bond. So if you want to live with these two properties of the material, it's radio opaque, you have it in different colors, you have try-in pastes, and it comes auto-mix with a mixing tip, and I really have clinically very good results with that.
Do you also use, for direct composites, do you also use a different direct composite for anteriors versus posterior? What do you use on the anterior teeth, and what direct composite do you use on the posterior teeth?
Actually, I'm no big composite specialist and artist. I am prosthodontist, so I work more indirect. And of course, I do my direct restorations as well. And I have an associate dentist who does all the direct composites, and she uses, I forgot the name, but it's a Dentsply product, the latest Dentsply composite on the capsules. For years, I'm really happy with the GC products. That is the Genial. It was, and I still use the Genial. Before it was Gradial, now it's Genial. And the Genial, you have the flow, the low flow, and the capsules, the paste material. And actually, only difference is on the posteriors. On the last layer where the occlusal forces, I use more the highly filled pastes. But in the anteriors, I use the low flow material. It has a golden tip. It's a Genial. I don't know the exact name, but it's a Genial low flow, I think, or that has a very nice consistency. Because I found for myself that the composites that are too hard, they are more difficult to adapt to the margin, and the material that has a higher viscosity, which is more liquid, it simply flows to the margins, and by that you get a good seal on the margins. So also in my posteriors, I do the bottom of the box with some more flowable, and then where the hard forces are on the occlusal, the more paste-like composite. But it's a genius.
You're a prosthodontist. You're focused on aesthetics. You know a lot about the stomatognathtic system, the temporomandibular disorders and treatments. So I want to ask you a real-world question. As a prosthodontist, if you're doing a single, do you ever use a triple tray, a quadrant tray for like one unit? And when does that change to say, no, we need full arch impressions and mounted on an articulator?
Actually, I am a big fan of the triple trays, and that there's also a story behind that, because when we made our digital lab 7 years ago, we scanned, we wanted to do a centralized, like a CAD/CAM procedure, and we wanted to scan the impressions. And in Germany, many dentists use the metal trays. Actually, I talked with Bill McHale from Veneer, and I think those are market leader in these triple trays. And we had our own triple trays made in our own color. And we did some studies on that. And in Germany, it was not common at all. So I think I also had a little bit an influence that more dentists use a triple tray in Germany, because there was a lot of literature that showed that in certain cases it's even better than the two big impressions, where then in the end the models don't fit on each other, and you really have to check the plaster so you're getting good occlusion. So I use the triple trays a lot, and exactly as you said, single units, also two crowns. So I would say a row of inlays, even a quadrant of inlays, because there you have an intracoronal restoration and the tooth is stable enough. I think I wouldn't do it for a bridge anymore, for a 3-unit bridge. I wouldn't also do it if you have no posterior support on the last tooth. I use it always when I have tooth in between, or maybe one second molar, one last tooth. So I always see that I have enough occlusal stability on the situation, so I can reproducibly have the patient close his mouth. And I think what's important with the triple trays, you really have to put a lot of material in there, because the amount of material is what stabilizes the whole thing. And you also have to check on the contralateral side before how the patient closes, and tell him how to bite, that he's really down. And sometimes I take an additional bite registration to just be sure, if I'm not sure if you really bit down. But actually, when you look at the triple tray and the light shines through the other teeth, then you know that occlusion is right. And for me, that works for years perfectly. Fit is no issue there. So I don't believe those who say you have to do everything with a big tray and full arch. Sometimes some dental technicians told me, but I would like to have seen the contralateral tooth, so I know better the shape, how it should be. So this is to be considered, or you give the dental technician a small impression of how the tooth looked before. But I think the triple tray absolutely belongs into every office. It's a good thing.
And since you see both sides of this, you're a prosthodontist and you see the lab side, where do you think optical impressions are today? Do you think they're as quality as a polyether or a polyvinyl siloxane? Is Germany seeing more optical impressions coming into the lab, or are they still seeing more polyethyl, polyvinyl? Where do you think that's at right now?
I'm thinking how to answer you the most relevant things, because again I could talk 2 hours about this. Actually, with our company we offered to our dentists optical scanners, and also I love technology, so I was really excited about this. And I knew the Brontes guys before it became 3M, and we always wanted to have that scanner, and I'm really fascinated by these things. But today I see it differently. It's really still a long way to go. And one thing maybe, I told that already many dental companies, and one thing that companies are working on is going away from the optical to go into ultrasound. So we really can go through soft tissue. That will be a revolution. The moment where we really can go through blood and soft tissue, and I think that will come. 10 years maybe, or 15, it will not come sooner, but that will be interesting. With the optical systems, what most companies who offer that, in my opinion, they don't see right is that it's not an impression device. They see it as a replacement for the impression. They see it as a prosthodontic device. I think optical scanners are very, very important and will be in a few years the most important interface in any dental office, because it's a universal digitizing tool. And I compare it with the smartphone. A smartphone is not a phone anymore. A smartphone is not a replacement for a phone. It can do so much more. But why can it do it? Because you have those apps. And these scanner companies, they don't offer us the apps. And I actually started a small development with a 3D programmer because I had many ideas what everything you could do with intraoral scans. And of course, many of these the companies know. But even the big companies in our market are small companies compared to some consumer companies or mobile phone companies. So they don't invest so much money into these things as we would need. So we could do longitudinal studies. We could check up on erosion. We could do so much with a digitizing tool. If it's not just regarded as replacement for the impression, because it's a replacement for the impression. Here in my office, and I think most offices in the US as well, you have these mixing machines. They are standing in each room. It's just a push of the button, and you have in half a minute filled up your tray, and you're ready to go. Today, you have to shut down the intraoral scanner in one room, carry it over, put in the plug, start up the computer, put in the patient name, do all this stuff just to replace an impression. That's not the strength of these scanners. So I think they will come, but industry will have to do a lot more to offer us the advantages that that it gets more useful to us, because just replacing an impression is not enough use. So it's worth spending tens of thousands of dollars or euros. And actually, I think the intraoral scanner, in a few years, it belongs in each unit. In each unit, next to your motor and your water spray, you have the scanner, and you just grab it, and you scan, and you do some scans in between to check on your quality of your prep, so you can prep quality. There are many of these ideas and apps that you can do, and I'm a little bit frustrated that these ideas we have since years, and but the companies, they have their own strategy. I learned that dental industry, it doesn't move in fast steps. They move very slowly, they proceed. It's always their process, but nobody really runs ahead and tries something because it will come by itself anyway. So I think it's a matter of time. Today, I wouldn't spend a lot of money on an intraoral scanner, because I think there are also these business models that the labs who actually profit from getting data, they will find ways to provide you with a cheap scanner. And the same like the mobile phone companies. you get these for a few euros if you make the contract with them to get to use their network. So that's somehow, I think they're quite good parallel to smartphones and the scanners. And they have to develop into this universal device and away from the simple impression device.
Is any optical scanner now better than all the other ones? Is there a best one, or are they all pretty much the same?
No, there are big differences. And I think if you look at all the features of the scanners, then everything that is technically possible and one scanner has, another scanner cannot allow itself anymore not to have. Example is powdering. If today you can do color and without powder, then it's a no-go that other scanners still have powder and are black and white, and say they have maybe higher precision or quality, because it's simply a feature. Nobody looks black and white TV anymore. So I think in terms of precision, there's enough literature that the TrueDepth is really ahead, but that is powder and black and white. And in terms of ease of use and speed and comfort and also sufficient precision, the new Trios, the one that was shown now on IDS. I will get it next week, and I'm really curious to use it because the model before already was quite good. And the Trios or Trios by 3Shape, that is also a scanner, because 3Shape is a software company. So I think from them I expect more the apps and the users I can do with it, because that's their strength. 3MSP is not a software company, and actually somehow that scanner doesn't really fit into their range of products, because they stopped selling hardware, but still the scanner they sell, it's not a piece of hardware. The scanner is only one component of a full solution, and the one who offers the dental office a scanner must offer the full solution in many areas. That's why CEREC is so successful, because the scanner is not the scanner. It was the means to be able to do chairside. So it was a component of one whole system, and the people bought the system and not the scanner. So I think the Trios is a scanner really worth looking at. But in regards of scanner, first you have to decide how your office concept is. What do you want with a scanner? Do you want to use it for prosthetics or also in prophylaxis? And are you orthodontists? Orthodontists use scanners actually quite successfully because they delegate. That's also a good thing. And in Germany, dentist is the one who takes the impression. So if you can delegate your impression, you have a really good assistant who's good at taking digital impressions. That helps incorporating your scanner. But you have to think about your whole office philosophy, how you want to incorporate this digital piece of hardware. And it's not about the device, actually. That's how I see it.
I want to ask you one final question, because we're over the hour. We're at an hour and 2 minutes. Thank you so much. One overtime question. You don't seem to be biased at all about which country makes what product. You're talking about countries all over the world. A country near you, Finland, Plan Mecca, just bought E4D, which was the second largest CAD-CAM in the United States. Do you think that'll be a game changer, or do you think Sirona is so far out ahead in CAD-CAM that Plan Mecca is not going to catch up?
It will not be a game changer because it's not only Plan Mecca, there's also Carestream, and there's also Lyra. Lyra is a very interesting company. It's a French system, and they sell in France, and I think even also in the US. They have an interesting business model, and also I have the Lyra in my house. I have also E4D in my office, because Kostin, my partner, he used E4D in California and he loved it. And we got one E4D from 3MSP here in Seefeld. 3MSP is very close to us. And they got the E4D at that time when they did the integration of the TrueDepth with the E4D. And then now it was sold by Plan Mecca. But I think nothing will be a game changer. Actually, what does Plan Mecca or E4D do? It's a clone of CEREC. Don't see much difference. The software is nicer, much better. I really think it's more intuitive. But in the end, Carestream, Plan Mecca, Sirona, they offer quite a similar thing. And I think those dentists for whom this is interesting, they already went this way. So a game changer can be a system that costs like only a fraction of what Sirona costs now. If you can get the whole thing for a few $1,000s or euros, then you get more dentists to use it. or if you offer a different business model, like a flat fee or something, where you provide also materials. And I think one big decisive factor is service. All these things will only work if you provide a solution to the office and you give perfect service. For example, I did CEREC, I do chairside, but I don't enjoy it because I have to perform in front of the patient. So this Lyra company, they team up with 3Shape labs, and the 3Shape lab, I can book time slots. I can schedule my patients, usually I know when to do my prep, and then I send the patient home for a few hours, or he goes to the city, and I schedule the time slot with the lab where 3Shape experts sit and do all my design. Because for me it's too expensive with my hourly rate to sit there and play around with a computer. And also I don't have a dental assistant who does that. So I think it's about the model, how you incorporate it, and the level of support and service you get from this company. And the better they support you and are reachable for you for every question, then they can be successful. But I don't see in Germany Planmaker or Carestream catch on. I don't know how many users they have, but for sure it's not exploding, this market. I can tell you that.
Well, I'm telling you, Juan, thank you so much for doing this for me. I really, really wanted to interview you for a long time, and the fact that you stayed up till 10 o'clock in Munich to do this for me, thank you so much for all that you've done for dentistry. Thank you for sending us your webinar that we'll be putting up on Dental Town, and I just thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you for inviting me, and actually I would be really glad to put up some more of the webinars. I think we talked about several topics now, which show that, which are actually, these are the areas I'm also teaching, and I can show cases and materials. So yeah, I'm in touch with Howard Goldstein, and I think if you have something you want to know more about it, let me know, and we do the webinars.
And they can reach you at www.hajto.de.
That's the website. I'm thinking if there is a email, actually my email address is my name, Hajto, at smile-art.de. Smile-art.de is our office website, where actually, that's maybe important, many of my publications I put up there as PDFs. So if you want to see what I published, cases, case reports and stuff, and also scientific things I did with Professor Frankenberger, you find a lot of stuff there as well. And I'm also glad to answer questions.
And I hope everybody listening commits at one time in their life they have to go to the Cologne meeting in Germany. And the reason I asked about Deutschland is because I almost missed my flight. I flew from Phoenix to New York to London, and I was looking for Cologne, Germany, and I spelled, Cologne, C-O-L-O-G-N-E, Germany. And I couldn't find my connecting flight, and I was panicking. Finally, I saw a pilot, and I'm like, how come they don't have the flight listen to Cologne, Germany? And he said, because you're an American. It's Köln, Deutschland. And he showed me the K, and I saw Köln, Deutschland. I thought, okay. So
next time you are at IDS, we should meet in person.
I will look you up. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.